June 12th, 2025. An Air India Boeing 787 is preparing to take off from Sardar Patel International Airport in Gujarat. Its flight number is AI-171. At 1:37 p.m. local time, the aircraft begins takeoff roll. 56 seconds after the wheels roll, the aircraft reaches V1, that is the takeoff decision speed. We will start counting time from the moment this speed is reached. 6 seconds, the plane becomes airborne. 9 seconds, the fuel supply to all engines of the plane is cut off. 14 seconds, the plane experiences a power shortage due to the shutdown of 2 engines, due to which the plane automatically deploys the ram air turbine to generate alternative power. It basically uses the kinetic energy of a moving plane to generate wind power. This helps to power hydraulics and flight control surfaces. 19 seconds, the fuel supply to engine 1 starts again. 23 seconds, the fuel supply to engine 2 starts. 32 seconds, realizing that a disaster is imminent, the doomed pilot sends a mayday signal to the ATC. ATC asks the crew to identify themselves, but before any response is received, the aircraft crashes. 38 seconds, enhanced airborne flight recorder, that is the black box, stops recording. Damages. The plane crashed into the BJ Medical College hostel, located at 1.5 kilometers from the airport. All the crew and passengers on board died except one. Amazingly, this lucky passenger survived with minor injuries and walked himself to the ambulance. According to many experts, he may have been able to save himself because his seat was near the emergency exit, seat 11A. In addition, 19 people on the ground were killed and 67 injured. The total death toll, including 241 souls on board, stands at 260. Crew. The cockpit was crewed by 2 pilots. One was Senior Captain Sumit Sabharwal, aged 56. He was unmarried and, to our knowledge, left behind no children. His father is still alive and is 88 years old. According to a report by NDTV in India, he took bereavement leave for his mother's death in 2022. Sumit Sabharwal was a veteran pilot. He had over 15,000 hours of flying experience, out of which 8,500 hours were on the Boeing 787. His co-pilot was First Officer Clive Kundar. He had 1,100 hours of flying experience on the Boeing 787. He was 32 years old. He was trained in aircraft maintenance engineering from Bombay. Then he completed his pilot training from Florida, America. His mother was a flight attendant and he was set to get married 2 months after the plane crash. Cause of the accident. Since the final report of this accident has not been published yet, nothing can be said for certain. It will take 1 year from the crash to publish this report. However, we can make some assumptions from the preliminary report released by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau from the Ministry of Civil Aviation, India, on 8th July 2025. The evidence found in the preliminary report mainly points to a deliberate incident, that is, it's most likely a case of kamikaze or suicide by pilot. Such incidents, although rare in the history of aviation, are not unprecedented. Below is a list of such incidents. The main reason behind these incidents is the mental health of the pilot. Because it is not usually possible for a healthy person to commit suicide, and on top of that, it is even more unusual to die with hundreds of passengers on board and innocent people on the ground. Now let's come to the details of this incident. 9 seconds after reaching the takeoff decision speed, the fuel supply switch of both engines of this aircraft was turned off. There is no chance of this switch being turned off unintentionally. Because the switches have 2 safety systems, there is a metal bracket on each side of the switches that can prevent unintentional operation of the switch. Also, this switch is locked by a spring. It needs to be pulled out before it can be thrown up or down. Without being pulled out first, it will not move from its place. In such a situation, it is not possible for the pilot to accidentally turn not one but both switches off. This can only be done intentionally. What could be the motive behind this possible crime? Who committed this crime and why? It is not possible to say for sure yet. However, either one of the two pilots did it. There is no video camera in the cockpit. There is only a voice recorder and a flight data recorder. Since the cockpit footage cannot be seen, it cannot be said without a doubt who cut off the fuel supply. However, some speculation can be made in light of the available information. The initial reports state that one pilot can be heard on the cockpit voice recorder saying to the other, "Why did you cut off?" To which the other replies, "I did not do it." But this report does not state which voice belongs to whom. However, the CVR has clear records of which voice came from which mic, which makes it clear which voice belongs to the captain and which to the first officer. That is, the Accident Investigation Bureau deliberately left out this key piece of information. However, in the light of aviation standard practices, it can be said that the pilot flying had both hands on the control column of the aircraft. According to FDR, the fuel supply switch was cut off only 3 seconds after the aircraft became airborne. In that case, it would not be possible for the pilot flying to turn off those two switches at that moment because both his hands were at the wheels. So, the arrow of suspicion naturally falls on the pilot monitoring. The pilot monitoring this flight was 56-year-old Captain Sumit Sabharwal. According to this hypothesis, it is Captain Sumit who asks, "Why did you cut off?" That is, he is the one who turned off the switch, taking advantage of the fact that the first officer, Clive, was preoccupied with the control column. Add to this the absence of a camera in the cockpit, which makes it easier for him to play the clueless victim. Later, he is the one who turned on this switch again and made the futile attempt to save the plane, knowing full well that restarting the engine at that moment would not be of any use. And later, he is the one who sent the Mayday signal to the ATC. But the question is, what is the benefit in playing the hero when you actually are the villain? Life insurance payments cannot be claimed for suicide. If the first officer was found guilty, Captain Sumit's family would be able to cash in a huge life insurance claim. But here, we have to investigate whether any life insurance policy was actually purchased in his name. As aviation is a risky profession, usually all pilots have life insurance, so making this assumption is quite natural. But it is not possible for a sane person to annihilate the families of hundreds of people to get life insurance money for his own family. So at the end of the day, greed is not the main motive here. The main motive is a sick mind. According to Captain Sumit's family, he was going to retire in a few days. Maybe he was seeing an existential vacuum at the twilight of an illustrious career. Maybe the looming threat of a purposeless life had scared him so much that he thought it better to let it all end rather than face it head on. Finally, it can be said that it is a great blessing that none of the pilots involved in the accident was a Muslim. Otherwise, India's biased media would have tried to link it with Indo-Pak War of 2025 by giving it a communal color. As a result, there was a chance of riots taking place all across India. However, these hundreds of lives could have been saved if the altitude of the plane had been slightly higher when the fuel switch was turned off. But the killer deliberately turned off the switch at a time when there was no way out. Only a fiery grave would be their final destination.